All right, let's go into a question from Summer. I am struggling heavily in my faith. It feels harder and harder every day to believe God exists. Do you have any advice for someone struggling with crippling intellectual doubts?
Yeah, I do have a suggestion, and I have talked about this before as a general principle or general. What's the right word? Maneuver? I don't know, but I haven't talked about it enough. And I think that whenever someone is thinking about abandoning Christianity or theism in general, they have to ask themselves this question: what's the alternative? What's the alternative? When I think about Christianity as a worldview, and I was just having this thought the other day, let's say many people maybe aren't like 100% convinced, or even Christians who are committed to Christ are still have this like 10% fudge factor of not being sure, even though the preponderance of evidence moves you in that direction. So you're trying to be faithful, but there's always this doubt. That's pretty normal. That's where the question, what's the alternative, comes up. Okay, what's the alternative? Atheism? Anybody who's thinking about that needs to just get a copy of Street Smarts and look at the chapter where I begin talking about atheism. And I'll be talking about this in reality in the next reality sequence. The major divide in worldviews is the question of God. And on the yes side of God, all kinds of things are wonderful things are possible. On the no side, if God doesn't exist, it is utter nothingness. It is nihilism. And that isn't just my view. I mean, it is my view, but I cite in there people like Bertrand Russell, who describes as a famous philosophical atheist, a British 20th century atheist, one of the most famous 20th century atheists. And he said, look at, I'm trying to remember the phrase, one of the phrases. It's the longest quote that I cited there, but it's just like bitter nothingness kind of phraseology. Even Richard Dawkins, he said, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. This is the world that atheism offers, because in atheism, all you have is molecules in motion. That's it. Because the vast majority of atheists are materialists. The universe is made up of molecules in motion. We don't know how it started, but this is what it is. And it's going to die out, and we're just what we are. No deep morality. The morality we think we have, that's just a trick of evolution. That's their answer. Values, well, whatever you value. I value what Christians think are good things, but I guess I'd have to say if somebody else valued what Christian thinks are not good things, it's no different, because there is no standard. And that's where you're left with moral nihilism. What about human purpose? Well, whatever purpose I give. I talk about this in the story of reality. And incidentally, there's no difference between purposes at that point. You might be Mother Teresa, you might be Hitler. In both cases, they've chosen their purpose. That's the existential move. All you can do is make your decisions for yourself. Okay, got it. But that's all there is. And see, I don't think that human beings, let me put it, I was going to say can't live this way, but that's too subjective. What I really mean is human beings know better. They know there's purpose to life. This is why they would talk someone out of a suicide. They know that there's right or wrong that's transcendent, which is why we make moral judgments all the time. Francis Schaeffer talks about the moral emotions. We are built for that. And we have every reason to believe we are built for that because morality is a deep-seated feature of the universe. This is why we complain about the problem of evil. If you go to atheism, there can be no problem of evil. It's one of the points I make in Street Smarts. And so what I try to do in that chapter is I try to say, here are the costs. Here are the costs. And it isn't just like a cost-benefit analysis. Find the one you like best. These are the metaphysical costs. If you go this direction, this is the world you are left with. Nihilism, nothingism, molecules in motion. That's it. If some form of theism, it would have to be a personal God theism. If some form, that would be theism as opposed to monism, but some form of theism is true, then it makes sense of so many other things that seem to be true features of reality. Morality is one of them. And there's a whole host of other things, purpose and dignity and all kinds, human rights, all that are all grounded in a properly grounded. They find a natural place in a theistic worldview. You get rid of God, you have that foundation no more. It's gone. Feet firmly planted in midair, right? There's nothing there. Do whatever you want. Maybe there is no God. But all of these other things are a casualty. And this reminds me of the Chester Brierley's book,
The Surprising Rebirth.
The Surprising, I always think of the adjective, I can't get it, The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God. And in this book, he's chronicling atheists who are moving towards theism because they realize everything they believe that's important about the world fits in a theistic worldview and does not fit at all in an atheistic worldview. We see the same thing in The Air We Breathe, right? In that book. So anyway, I know you want to jump in here, but my advice is to ask the question when you're doubting the existence of God, for whatever reason, and I'm not saying dismiss the reasons, but for whatever reason, you have to ask yourself, what's the alternative? And I'm not suggesting that you choose the alternative that's more tasteful to you, that you like better. I'm asking to think about the alternative that comports more with our common sense understanding of the nature of reality. The price that you pay to be an atheist is immense. In other words, the things that I would have to affirm are the universe came from nothing. Morality is just a trick. There is no problem of evil. Consciousness springs out of matter. Life came from non-life. I mean, these are all parts of that program. These are wildly counterintuitive. And this is why I'm, as a thoughtful person, atheism has no appeal to me whatsoever. Mm-hmm. What's the alternative?
That is a great overall way to look at this, Greg. I just have a couple practical tips on top of that, but I think that's really the key. I think what you've just said here. But my first thing would be, I would look at where your doubts are coming from. Maybe you're spending a lot of time. Sometimes people spend a lot of time in apologetics and then they get out there and then all of a sudden they're engaging tons of atheists and they're just spending a lot of time reading other views. Now, the problem with some of that is that there are a lot of people out there who use a lot of scorn and insults instead of arguments, but it's very easy to absorb that. And I think maybe even especially for women, to absorb that point of view and start to think Christianity doesn't look so plausible now. But not because they actually gave a reason. It's because of their scorn. It's because of their insults and their mockery. Those aren't arguments. So what you want to do is take that out of the equation. So maybe if you've been interacting with people who have been arguing that way, then just stay away from them for a while. That doesn't mean you have to ignore actual real questions. It just means take that element out of what you're dealing with right now to see if maybe that is actually...
sidestep the attitude kind of thing.
Yeah. And also, again, especially as women, I think we see through other people's eyes and we get into their perspectives. We get very empathetic and we see things from their perspective. So it's easy to take that on. So just get a little separation. Take one question at a time. Don't get overwhelmed. It's easy to go from question to question. Well, what about this? What about this? Just give yourself some room, take one at a time and start looking at that one. And then say, okay, I don't know these others, but that's okay. I'll get to those. You can write them down, you can leave them and come back to them later. But just do one at a time. You don't want to overwhelm yourself.
Great point.
And then finally, I wonder... Sometimes people start to doubt God because they have been looking at all these intellectual things, and they start to wonder, okay, well, where's the experience of God? And the reason why is they've gotten away from actually interacting with God. It's moved into the point where it's all about thinking and questions and looking at God through a microscope or whatever it is.
Abstract.
Yeah,
somewhat
kind of
abstract.
And you've actually really just kind of walked away from him. It's like if I had a good friend and then I suddenly stopped talking to that friend, and maybe I started talking to other people about the friend, but I never actually talked to that friend, you start to feel some distance. So if this is coming from a place where you're questioning because of your experience, then I would say keep reading your Bible, keep praying to the extent that you're able to, but especially just keep reading your Bible, keep thinking, shaping your mind, keeping your mind grounded in the perspective of the truth. And that's something I pray for all the time. Help me see things the way you see them and not be swayed by other people's perspectives illegitimately. So what you want to do is shape your mind with the Bible, slow down on answering your questions, and just take a breather and just keep going. Gary Habermas wrote a book called The Thomas Factor that talks about the different kinds of doubts and ways that you can approach those. And that's available online at his website. If you just look up The Thomas Factor, you can find it for free on his website. And so those are all things I think could be helpful.
Incidentally, C.S. Lewis said sometimes when he thinks about Christianity, it seems so implausible to him. And then he reminds himself that when he used to think about atheism, it also seemed so implausible. There were times when it seemed so implausible. So having a season where you're thinking, well, that's really? That was 2,000 years ago. That all matters now, and it seems so implausible. Well, what's the alternative?